The first time my grandmother introduced me to her new neighbor, I smiled politely, expecting nothing more than another friendly conversation over a white picket fence. I had no idea that within a few minutes, one sentence from a complete stranger would shake the foundation of everything I believed about my family, my past, and even myself. I thought I was simply spending a quiet summer weekend helping my grandmother around her old countryside home. Instead, I walked straight into a truth that had been hidden for more than 25 years, a truth that would transform pain into healing and silence into forgiveness. The summer sun poured across the little town of Maple Crossing, painting everything in warm golden light. The streets were lined with blooming flowers, children rode bicycles beneath towering oak trees, and neighbors waved to one another with genuine smiles that seemed almost forgotten in the busy city where I lived. My name was Rowan Mercer, and after years of working endless hours as a financial consultant, I had finally accepted my grandmother's invitation to spend a week with her. My parents had divorced when I was very young, my mother had passed away several years earlier after a long illness, and my relationship with the rest of my family had slowly faded into occasional holiday phone calls. Grandma Iris was the only person who never stopped checking on me, never stopped believing that one day I would remember what truly mattered. She was 78 years old, yet every morning she woke before sunrise to water her flowers, bake fresh bread, and fill the tiny house with the comforting smell of cinnamon and vanilla. Her laughter echoed through every room, hiding the loneliness that had quietly settled around her after Grandpa passed away. Even though she never complained, I could see how much she appreciated having someone nearby again. We spent our days repairing loose fence boards, trimming roses, and sorting through dusty boxes stored in the attic. Those peaceful moments slowly reminded me of the childhood summers the first had nearly forgotten. On the third afternoon, Grandma Iris suggested we carry a basket of homemade blueberry muffins to welcome her newest neighbor. She explained that an elderly man had recently moved into the small white cottage next door after living away for decades. She smiled mysteriously, almost as if she knew something I did not. I assumed she simply wanted to continue her tradition of making every newcomer feel welcome. We walked slowly across the lawn under a brilliant blue sky filled with singing birds. The white cottage looked modest but well cared for. Fresh paint covered the porch railings, colorful flower pots decorated the entrance, and an old wooden rocking chair faced the quiet street. Before I could knock, the front door opened. Standing there was a tall elderly man with silver hair, gentle green eyes, and weathered hands that spoke of a lifetime of honest work. His expression was calm, yet there was an unmistakable sadness resting behind his smile. Grandma Iris introduced me warmly, then looked at him with unusual tenderness. What she said next made time seem to stop around me. She quietly explained that this was Theodore Hale, the man who had saved my mother's life when she was only 12 years old, and the same man who had spent more than 2 decades trying to find our family again after we suddenly disappeared from the town. My heart pounded so loudly I barely heard the birds anymore. I stared at the stranger, unable to understand why I had never heard his name before. As we sat together on the porch, Theodore slowly shared pieces of a story that no one had ever told me. Many years earlier, during a violent summer storm, my mother had become trapped beneath a fallen tree while walking home from school. Theodore, who had been driving nearby, risked his own life to pull her to safety moments before floodwaters swept through the road. Afterward, he became a close family friend, helping my grandparents whenever they needed anything. He fixed broken fences, repaired leaking roofs, and even taught my young mother how to ride a bicycle after her father became too ill to do it himself. Everything changed when my grandparents moved unexpectedly after financial hardships forced them to sell their home. Telephone numbers changed, addresses were lost, and over time everyone drifted apart. Theodore admitted he searched for years but never found them. Eventually life carried him elsewhere, though he never stopped wondering whether the little girl he rescued had grown into a happy woman. Listening to him, I felt both warmth and confusion. My mother had always spoken very little about her childhood. Whenever I asked questions, she simply smiled sadly and changed the subject. Now I wondered how many stories had disappeared with her. The following days became something entirely unexpected. Every morning after breakfast, Theodore joined Grandma Iris and me for coffee beneath the shade of the old maple tree separating our yards. Instead of speaking about regrets, he filled every conversation with stories that brought forgotten memories back to life. He remembered the songs my mother loved to sing while picking wildflowers. He described the handmade birthday cards she created for everyone in town. He even remembered how she dreamed of becoming an artist before life forced her into practical responsibilities. For the first time since losing my mother, I didn't feel like I was mourning someone distant. I felt like I was meeting her all over again through the eyes of someone who had genuinely loved her, not romantically, but with the pure affection of lifelong friendship. One afternoon Theodore disappeared briefly into his house before returning with a worn wooden box wrapped carefully in faded blue cloth. Inside were dozens of photographs, newspaper clippings, handwritten recipes from my great-grandmother, and a small leather journal. My hands trembled as I opened its pages. My mother's handwriting filled every line. She had written about dreams, fears, hopes, and gratitude toward the people who had shaped her childhood. Several pages mentioned Theodore by name, thanking him for teaching her that kindness was something a person chose every single day, regardless of how difficult life became. As I read those words, tears quietly rolled down my face. All those years I believed I had lost every connection to my mother's younger life. Yet somehow this quiet neighbor had preserved pieces of her heart better than anyone else. That evening I walked alone through Maple Crossing. The warm daylight slowly softened into a glowing sunset, and every familiar street seemed different now. I realized how much of my own life had been consumed by chasing promotions, larger apartments, expensive possessions, and endless deadlines. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped calling friends, stopped visiting family, and convinced myself that success alone would bring happiness. Standing beneath the old oak trees, I finally understood how empty that success had become. The next morning Grandma Iris confessed something she had carried inside for years. After moving away, my parents experienced one hardship after another. Medical bills, job losses, and constant relocations left them emotionally exhausted. They slowly withdrew from nearly everyone they once knew because they felt ashamed of needing help. It wasn't pride alone that kept them distant. It was fear that people would see how much they were struggling. Hearing this broke my heart because I recognized the same habit within myself. Whenever life became difficult, I isolated myself instead of reaching toward others. The remainder of the week became less about uncovering secrets and more about rebuilding connections. Theodore introduced me to neighbors who still remembered my family. They shared stories, photographs, and laughter that filled spaces inside me I never realized were empty. Children played in the sunny streets while adults gathered for community lunches beneath colorful banners. I saw strangers helping elderly neighbors carry groceries, teenagers volunteering to repair playground equipment, and families sharing meals without expecting anything in return. The town reminded me that communities are built through countless small acts of kindness rather than extraordinary moments. Before returning to the city, I helped Theodore restore the neglected community garden beside the local library. Together we planted roses, tomatoes, lavender, and sunflowers beneath the bright afternoon sky. Grandma Iris smiled proudly as children eagerly joined us, digging tiny holes and watering fresh seedlings. Watching several generations working side by side filled me with a peace I hadn't experienced in years. Back in the city, life immediately tried to pull me into old routines. Emails multiplied, meetings filled every hour, and deadlines returned without mercy. But something inside me had changed. Instead of working late every night, I began calling Grandma Iris every evening. I volunteered on weekends at a neighborhood food pantry. I reconnected with cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. I even started painting during quiet evenings because Theodore had reminded me that my mother once dreamed through colors instead of numbers. Months passed, and every small decision slowly transformed my life. Promotions became less important than meaningful conversations. Busy schedules no longer replaced family gatherings. My apartment, once silent and empty, slowly became a place where friends shared dinners and neighbors stopped by for coffee. Kindness spread quietly from one person to another, just as Theodore had always believed it would. Then one crisp autumn afternoon I received another handwritten letter from Grandma Iris. Inside was a photograph of herself standing beside Theodore in the flourishing community garden surrounded by enormous sunflowers reaching toward the clear daytime sky. On the back she had written only one sentence. Families aren't only the people we're born with. Sometimes they're the people who never stopped caring while waiting for us to find our way home. Those simple words became the compass for every choice I made afterward. If this story has touched your heart so far, please like this video, share it with someone you love, and subscribe to Echoes of Hope so together we can continue spreading stories that remind the world kindness still exists. Special request: before this story ends, please leave a comment with the words, "Kindness always finds its way home." We'd love to read your thoughts and hear about someone whose kindness changed your life. H.